because we have another panel, and then we have Lina Khan. So, unmissable. Please, can I have my... Can we release Franc, who's still on screen, and can I have my other panel? Robin. Apologies, Jonas, I can see you. Everybody's coming back up on screen. Sorry, we started the panel 10 minutes late for the previous one, and so we are making up time. Can we have everybody on screen right now, on stage right now? Who is involved in this? Okay. Okay. Please sit down, everyone. Again, I'm having to play. Why do you make me play this part? This is a difficult part to play. I have to crack the whip the whole time. Okay. We have... Are we all here, present and correct? I think we are. I can see Jonas on screen. Where is Marian? Where is Marian? Where is he? Sorry. Come closer. You look like you want to avoid me. Okay.
We're still missing.
All right. Let's make a start. Let's close the doors and lock the doors. Lock them in.
Hey, I'm Robin, by the way.
Anywhere you like, Axel. Thank you so much. So. I appreciate this is the last panel of the day, and it is, of course, been a demanding day, but the topic is something that I find absolutely close to my heart. It is riveting. It is a campaign that I really feel we should be all behind. And to take up a point that, of course, Franc made in the previous panel, infrastructure is key. We have regulation in Europe. We discussed it all day or all afternoon, which is great, and it does a lot of useful things, or at least we hope it will eventually. Who knows? But the reality that we face as a continent is that we have very little of the digital infrastructure that is ours. Franc was saying at the very end, Europe is a huge continent. You have the potential for creating something which is not just a vassal of the large tech companies. Why aren't we mobilized behind this idea? And so I think we will have this panel really going back and forth around this, and I'm particularly delighted that we have people from the tech business directly, because it is all jolly good to talk about what the future might be as between regulators, civil society, think tanks, economists, and imagine the world. But unless business is motivated to pursue an idea, then we are not going to get anywhere. So there's been some changes to this panel in that Francesca is ill, couldn't make it. Andrea Obermann had a board meeting and at the last minute couldn't make it, but we still have an absolutely great quorum to be able to talk about the idea. Jonas Andrulis, who's not on the platform, is nonetheless on screen, and we'll talk in a moment. I don't want to be talking always too much, so I will hand over straight away to my fellow conspirator, Robin Burgeon, who is one of the people I've relied on, and we've relied on each other in developing this idea that we really need to build in Europe, not just regulate. This is a mantra that I know resonates with many. We've been behind digital regulation. We're not suggesting it should be repealed. It has a function. On the other hand, we witness parts of the world like India building quite aggressively products and services that have demand. And we are at the same time looking at the reality of European portions of the digital industry, like cloud, shrinking, right? I mean, the statistic is striking. Cloud, European cloud, used to supply something like almost 20% of European cloud needs in 2017. Now it's down to less than 10%. We have cloud companies in Europe. Why is everybody contracting with AWS and Microsoft? We have portions of the infrastructure. So with Robin and others, there's a big group of us, and it should be really bigger, and we hope that more will join, have been thinking about a vision for what we think should be an entire digital vertical supply chain in Europe that could not replace big tech one for one, but play a role, and not put us in this position of complete colony, because this is what we are today. Let's not just beat about the bush. We are a colony. So the people on the platform are able to talk about it in various ways, but I'll start with you, Robin, so you can give the vision and what you as a technologist see into this and why you think it stands a chance if it is properly applied.
Yes.
Done.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'll develop this, of course, but at the end of the day, what I'm going to say repeats, in a sense, what you just did, which is we've been hearing a lot over those past few years about sovereign tech, but it seems that the only thing that comes out is sovereign talk, sovereign talk. And I want to be concrete about that. It's not just a line. It's really, I've been in tech for 30 years. I've been in the private sector for the entirety of it. I've founded and led small companies. I've been in positions of responsibility in larger ones. I've advised companies around the world, household names on tech strategy, all this time. And I think it's important for people to understand the view from the ground, what it looks like if you're a company, if you're a business, trying to create a digital product out there. We talk in abstractions of regulation and sovereignty and all that, but in practice, what you have to deal with is problems with the cloud providers that are often overpriced. You have to deal, if you want to ship an app, you need to deal with the App Store, and immediately you're looking at a private taxation of 50 to 30%, and you have to abide by their rules. If you have an advertising business model, you're looking at private taxation, again, of 30, 40, 80%, and yet again more rules. If you want people to find you, you have to abide by the rules of search. You have to provide them with free labor so that your thing works. Again, the same thing in social. You have to abide by their rules if you want to be found. You have to pay to be even visible, even when people look for you actively. And that's not even talking about marketplaces like Amazon, where you have to follow their rules and pay very high fees and provide free laborers, and they get all your data, etc., etc. I could keep going. I could actually keep going, and I know this is already a long list. But when you look at it, as a technologist, as someone who's done digital business, when you sit back, in my mind, it's a miracle that anyone manages to run any kind of business on the internet if you're not one of the hyperscalers. It's incredible that people survive. It's the same thing in media, right? People say, oh, we haven't found the business model of media on the internet. That's absolute nonsense. If people stop, taking all that money, taking all that free labor, then those businesses are entirely viable. And so, we're here because this infrastructure is entirely captured. And what we need to do in the face of captured infrastructure is we don't need subsidies. We don't need innovation funding. If some guy controls all the roads, then you can give me money to invent a better road, like a better asphalt, but once I'm done, that guy still controls all the roads. What am I gonna do with my better road? Make a second road system on top of it? It doesn't work that way. That's not how infrastructure works. And so, yes, we've seen a lot of regulation, and regulation can help. When I was in charge of data governance at the New York Times, we were actually excited about GDPR. That's not a story you hear a lot, but we were excited. Why? Because we saw the potential that it could protect our business from all these hyperscalers, from Google, constantly prying our data and using it to compete with us. Of course, we were disappointed because nothing happened. This is like European-style regulation. It's all about speech and no action. And so even if there had been action, it probably wouldn't have been enough, but it could have potentially helped. But so essentially, at the end of the day, what we need to understand is that infrastructure is power. Power, power, power. And when you control infrastructure, you control the future. And like Cristina talked about colony, it's entirely true. Digital is the infrastructure of infrastructure itself. It's everywhere across society. And to the extent that our lives and our businesses depend on digital infrastructure, we live in occupied territory. That's, the end of the story. That's where we are. And so sovereignty is not a regulatory problem, right? It's almost entirely about power, and this power is contained in infrastructure. So that might have been a bit of a dark picture. But the whole point of the Eurostack is that we have a plan. So it's not all dark. I'm quite hopeful that we can fix this, because it is fixable. For that, we need to start with a strategic vision and understanding of what digital infrastructure is, how it works, and how to change it. What does that include? Well, the first thing, and that's not something that, again, you hear people say a lot, is that infrastructure is incredibly boring and unglamorous. Like the work that needs to be done is not, shiny, glossy, super sexy kind of work. In fact, if you look at the people doing the work, like I'm thinking, for instance, of the Sovereign Tech Agency in Germany, some of the few people who are actually doing work that is impactful, when you look at their remit, it's amazingly boring. They're doing maintenance of open source infrastructure. Like you can't get to the end of that sentence without people glazing over. And yet, if you don't do that, then systems fall apart and occasionally people die. So it's incredibly important, no matter how boring it is. And actually, as someone who has worked as a consultant, I can give you a piece of advice, which a lot of the time with technology, if it sounds cool and sexy, it's probably fake. So when you hear about like AI, this or that, a lot of the time you're like, wow, this sounds amazing. It's almost certainly fake, right? So why am I insisting on the boring nature? Because politically it's challenging to get people to care about boring things. But we can if we focus on it, if we understand the power dynamics in it and why it matters. So, but second, like, what is it that we're dealing with? A lot of the time when you say digital infrastructure, people think, connectivity, data centers, that's about it, right? But the truth is, it runs much deeper than that. It covers much more ground, much more of business, much more of society than that. If it's something that is hard to replace because of scale or because of network effects, if it has a lot of diverse users, so that the people who use it are quite scattered in their interests, and if there's a real risk of control of the users by the operators, then you're dealing with infrastructure. And that is, the rules that we used to come up with the list of digital infrastructure items in the Eurostack report. And you'll notice it's a long list. Of course, there's lower level stuff. Yes, there are data centers. Yes, there's connectivity. Yes, there's HPC. But there's also everything from like search, social, cloud, advertising, open source systems, browsers, etc., etc. It's a long list, but we have to reckon with it. We have to be open to the fact that it is a massive undertaking. So how do we deal with this massive undertaking? So some of you might have heard of a Chamber of Progress report that priced this massive undertaking at 5 trillion euros. Actually, I'm not sure if it was euros or dollars, but I don't know if that matters at that kind of scale. Of course, it's nonsense, and that's fine. It's the Chamber of Progress's job to come up with nonsense in support of big tech. That's fine, but actually, this project, ambitious as it is, does not have to be that expensive. Why? Because there are projects the world over, many in Europe, many elsewhere, that we can federate. We can bring together people who already have pieces of the puzzle working. We can help organize industry. We can federate people around a strategy, a plan, in each of the segments that we want to work on. And there are examples of this. Like if we look at the Free Our Feeds initiative that is bringing algorithmic pluralism and independent infrastructure for social media, it's something that can work. If we look at the Beacon protocol in India that can be used for replacing Uber or having like business marketplaces for e-commerce or for energy trading, there's a lot that we can reuse out there. And if we break the problem into chunks, we can actually solve it. And so I encourage you all, of course, to read the report. It's an excellent report. It has the beginning of the details, not enough detail to actually execute on it, but enough that we can come together around a strategy. And yes, to conclude, these are dark and stormy times, no doubt about that, but I want to insist on this. I absolutely have hope because we absolutely can do this. This is entirely fixable. Digital infrastructure that is good for society, that works for business, is worth fighting for. And trust me, I can show you the scars, like we're talking about that. I can show you the scars, Cristina can show you the scars, a few of us can. But we have a plan, together we can detail it further. But what we need is less sovereign talk and more sovereign walk. Thank you.
Yay, thank you, Robin, a great introduction. Now I want to move on to Axel Voss, MEP, well known to all of you. I want to really thank and congratulate Axel for having been one of the early supporters of this initiative in the European Parliament. Back in September, we held a multi-party event at the Parliament in which we were, a group of us, and Axel was amongst the speakers, elaborating on this plan, on this vision, which, as Robin says, at this point lacks detail. Of course it does, because we are just beginning to move along that path. But it is very important that someone like Axel of his caliber and significance in the political sphere in Europe is involved in some dimension in this plan. Do you want to elaborate on that, Axel, a bit? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the invitation, and thanks for the introduction statement already. I can totally underline probably 99% of it. And so this is the way we should like to continue, if we can say continue. So far, I would say Europe has failed. Not in regulation, we have a lot of regulations, but in the execution of the ideas of digital decade and so on. And here I think we should just come forward, and therefore the title is totally correct. This is a do or die moment, I would say. 5 years ago, I would have said already we have only 5 years left. There's a window of opportunity. Now we can say probably 1 or 2 years, but then it's decisive now what we are doing. And still, speed is a factor, I would say. We can't take our time for have wonderful discussions any longer. Now we need to act and to execute the ideas what we have in mind. But on digital sovereignty, for me, it's not just an economic issue. It's about security. It's also industrial policy and also kind of a geopolitical imperative already. And we have, and this is a question I have always in mind, and saying, how can Europe survive digitally? So far, we are doing this very badly. And that's why we need a kind of a disruptive moment now where we are, let's think about dimensions, access to quality data, for instance. And here, of course, the consequence is we need to rethink data protection. Probably we should revise the whole situation. If you're asking me, more than less radicalized by all these years, now I would say we should change the whole structure in having these, everything is allowed until you are being too intrusive to our privacy lives. So not every single data we have to protect, and it doesn't make sense in such a way. So that's why probably we need to move from data protection to privacy protection, and then we can give more access to data. Even taking up the competition, if we're looking to browsers, search engines, cloud services, and so on, even if we won't be better than others, it might make sense if we are collecting data. Or on the other hand, we probably can also come to a kind of a mutual agreement and saying, if you are using our data, we can use your data. So data is a key element we need to work on. And also these data spaces, what we are trying to create now with health data, European health data space. So it's taking too much time. And we need to balance, of course, the protection of the individual and also the use of data for everyone who is interested in. But we can balance this better, but we need to do it very fast from my point of view. And so all these infrastructure elements, probably it's not always necessary to being competitive, but as a kind of a search engine, we can have also a European one, obliging all European administrations in using this, that you can get traffic, you have data, and probably you get a piece of the cake of advertising market. So some concepts like these might be also helpful for the future. And if we are thinking about Eurostack, this is something what I have learned also the last month or half a year or so. It's this is a way where we can control better what's going on, and we have already some elements in place what we can use then, like e-IDAS, for instance, or e-payment. When we are coming to the digital euro and so on, then we have already something in place for it. So also data spaces, what we have in the Data Act mentioned, and the e-identity like in e-IDAS. So if we're putting this all together in a kind of a structure of a Eurostack, then I would say this is a way forward. But now we need to execute these, and as soon as possible. And then we can regain some of the sovereignty, also some of the market shares and so on. And here I would say it's urgent that we are coming to this point. And now I'm trying to convince my group that we should step up a bit and then trying to influence the Commission and the Council. It's probably one of the hardest challenges to change the mindset of national politicians. And I hope we're coming to this. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really to emphasize, it is so important to have a parliament, important voices like yourself, and not just from one side of the spectrum or the other side, but really from a majority center view, really feel the need for progress in this area. And so this is not a sort of a minority initiative, but it is one that really we want to be supported by the bulk of the positions in Parliament. As you say, the missing actor in this discussion is our friend the Commission. We had a Commission speaker, but he was vanished. And so we would like to invite the Commission to really engage in this, because as you can tell, and we're going on to talk to Jonas and to the business side, there is considerable interest for this prospect. And of course, the Commission is a key actor in all of this. It has played an important part in, and it is involved right now in designing industrial policy, which has got to be also directed at our digital policy. So Let me now turn to Jonas. I'll be speaking to the business just because it is important that in this town, where the Commission is just outside, not in the room, but just outside, we hear the voice of business. Business has been told, and I'm not exceedingly negative, but in the last 4 or 5 years that, the cavalry was coming, digital regulation was coming, we have the DMA, we have all of these things that are going to just create the level playing field. When I talk to business now, there is a level of disillusionment, there is a level of disappointment, this hasn't really delivered so far, what are we waiting for? We are not sure. So, Jonas is of course the CEO of Aleph Alpha, major AI play in Germany. I think it's important to hear voices like yours. I'm sure you make this point to the Commission on your own and repeatedly, but saying loudly that we need a different play. We need to build and not just be subjects. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but please go ahead.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to participate. And I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Sovereignty can only come from strength, and strength can only come from value. We cannot regulate ourselves, we cannot complain ourselves into sovereignty and strength. We have to build. We have to innovate, we have to build, and we have to create the future. And this is difficult, and this is difficult because we are competing in a global market, and we're competing against people that are extremely good at what they're doing. They have a lot of budget, a lot of firepower, and they're freaking ruthless, right? So they will not break at all one bit if they can increase their shareholder value. And that's their job, right? We shouldn't be surprised. Let's not be naive and think, although they're so charming and so nice people, right? And they come and visit and shake hands, and they do all that, and they are charming and nice people, but they have one job and one job only, and that is complete dominance and maximum value extraction. And so basically what we need is, and this is really what to me is the only path towards long-term sovereignty, is value creation. This can go through innovation. This can go through boldly going towards the future, not be risk averse, not be too cautious, but to kind of shaping the future. And this is a different, this goes differently for different enterprises and governments, but every player has opportunities here. But then it's also about value capture. And value capture requires power. It requires the ability to choose and the ability to act. There's a reason why NVIDIA currently does 80% of gross margin on hardware, because nobody has a choice. This is now slowly changing, right? So this will probably not stay like that for a long time, but it was a phenomenal example. And the same, of course, goes for digital infrastructure. The same goes for cloud infrastructure. These systems are so mature and so powerful that it's not easy to have a choice. And so we can complain, we can dislike that. We can think that this is not necessarily a good thing, but it doesn't change the reality of the fact. And we should also not fall into the trap of the planned economy, where we think that we know better what to build, right? We have this plan, and we can just funnel all this money into this plan that Europe and Brussels has, and Berlin has decided upon. And so this will all create a lot of value, and because we have such a great understanding of what the market, what the economy really needs. The problem we have is that we make decisions while ignoring strategic externalities. We have set up a system where our enterprises, where our governments, our administration, we are choosing the short-term cheapest option. And the short-term cheapest option, these are the smart projects. Like you've all seen plenty of those examples where US tech is offering us €1 projects. just to get their foot in the door. And because they understand the long-term strategic externalities of owning the platform, of owning the data, and of driving the innovation flywheel. And so if we had a vibrant innovation ecosystem and we would buy our own innovation from startups, from enterprises, this would create so much value for the ecosystem, for brilliant people. This would pull people to Europe to start businesses here or to join companies here. This would basically make us all stronger. But those are externalities. They're not visible directly when a government is doing a procurement decision or when an enterprise is making a choice of a software platform. All those positive effects that we could have for Europe that would make it all work, like the math would all work out. Those are externalities, and they're not part of the decision the individual players make. So the huge tech players, they not only own monopolies, they own monopoly chains. They have like monopolies or quasi-monopolies in markets next to one another. And whenever something new enters the scene, a new technology, a new opportunity, they can use their existing monopoly chains to distort the market in a way that it makes no sense for any other player to enter. And so this is unfair, right? This is not free competition. And of course, it makes perfect sense from their perspective, but it prevents new players from entering. So I think this is what we need to look at. We need to look at strategic externalities. We need to look at distortion of markets through monopoly players, through monopoly chains. AI is a phenomenal example here, right? There are certain things in AI that don't work as a business model. And the reason why they don't work as a business model is because Chinese and US players are distorting the market. So we need to think about how can we spend the resources we have. This is money. This is also knowledge. We have enterprises, and some of them are our partners, that have a deep knowledge and a team with expertise and experience that is rivaled by none in the world. Like, this is our resources: the knowledge, the experience, the infrastructure we already have, not necessarily so much digital, but also other infrastructure, a place worth living in. And we need to direct those resources towards a plan that makes us long-term strong. For every resource spent, I want to hear how will this make us super strong 5 years down the road? And if you cannot answer that question, we should maybe double think whether we want to spend resources that way.
That's
Thanks.
great. Thank you, Jonas. Very good points. One of the things that you said that I want to amplify, Robin mentioned it as well before moving on to Andy, is really that what you were saying is that no one here is looking for handouts. No one here is looking for large subsidies and large government-led plans. I mean, I think there is a great sense that this notion that we need to build is not something that happens because we are waiting for great subsidies from the state. We are very much of the view that business can build if demand is created. Demand needs to be there, but it isn't the case that we're waiting for the great central government plan. So on this note, I want to move on to Andy Yen, who has made, of course, a great effort to be here also in person. Andy is the founder and CEO of Proton Mail, end-to-end encrypted, secure email service. And although you are originally an American, you founded your business here in Europe. And I think that really entitles you to talk about European infrastructure and what should happen. Please go ahead.
I think it's actually more complicated than that, because I started my life actually in Taiwan originally. And then I got my education in the US. And then I came out to work on my PhD in Europe. And then I created the business over the last 10 years here in Europe. And that's interesting because it means I've seen the Asian perspective, I've seen the American perspective, and now I see the European perspective. And it's rare to I think, have that perspective from all three sides. and you notice some very interesting patterns. So it's quite interesting, Robin, you mentioned this crazy ecosystem where it's impossible to survive, right? And we're basically one of those companies trying to survive. And I thought it was also very interesting that Frank mentioned the story about email, because our main product, Proton Mail, is basically trying to be the alternative to Gmail, to be a more secure and more private system. And the reason we're in Europe is because Europe is a place where if you believe in democracy, if you believe in freedom, if you believe in privacy, this is the real last place in the world where you can actually still build. And I think that's a competitive advantage. So when I was asked to speak here, I thought, well, everybody here is in policy, maybe some people in government, and I'm from business, which is a completely different world, but I think it's great to be invited. And I thought, well, what are the key messages that I should share? And what I want to do is actually share what is top of mind for a business like Proton, which is European, trying to defend European ideals, but at the same time, in a fierce competition with American big tech. Right? Proton Mail is a direct competitor to Gmail. We have our Proton Drive product as well. Everything we do, big tech has a version of. And we're trying to do it here in Europe. It's not been easy, as you say. We managed to get to 500 employees and 100 million users, but that was with both hands tied behind our back, right? So I think there's two main key insights I would want to share. First is around the idea of mindset. And what do I mean by that? I think for too long, especially as I compare US, Asia, and now Europe, where I spend roughly, different portions of my life, what is I find lacking in the European mindset is we operate sort of under the assumption that if we play fair, the rest of the world is going to treat us fairly. And it's simply not true, right? I'll give you an example. In Asia, in China, for example, European tech products are simply locked out of certain sensitive industries. So de jure, we are locked out. In the US, there's no laws of this sort, but very strong first mover advantage means that de facto European firms are locked out. So given that we are locked out effectively of the two biggest markets, which are flooding into our own domestic market, why are we trying to play fair? Right? It's completely unfair to begin with. And China, for the past 70 years, or maybe even longer, maybe even 1,000 years, or even 5,000 years, it's a long history, right? Has always been China first. And America actually has always been America first. If there was any doubt, I think Trump probably makes that clear that it is American first environment. So why is it so taboo in Europe to have the notion of Europe first? Why is it so taboo to say, buy European? When I was studying in the US, that was actually proudly, made in USA, right? Proudly made in USA, buy American. Yet in Europe, we seem afraid to embrace our own industries and protect our own, economies. Why? For a fairness that doesn't exist anymore in the world. So that's, I think, the number one mindset change that we need to go through, because we need to be ready to defend our, our economies. And why do I say this? Well, there's actually a historical analogy. You can actually go back to China 25 years ago when they first started going online. At that point, China took a conscious decision to lock out American tech companies in order to develop their own domestic industries. I would argue that Europe's situation today is actually worse than China 25 years ago. Why? Because China started at zero. We have already been colonized. We're starting at negative, right? So given where we start and where we have to get to, we need to be not afraid to embrace dramatic policies. We need to be not afraid to mandate, for example, that procurement of maybe public procurement be by European. And this is absolutely necessary because without demand, as we were talking about, without demand, you don't have industry, you don't have value creation. And that's the model which we definitely need to address. I might end by giving everybody an example of, and this goes to my second message. My second message is the time actually is now. It's not tomorrow. It's not even a month from now. It's literally now. Actually, it was probably 5 years ago, but it really is now, right? On the way here, when I was flying in today, I saw an article talking about Donald Trump wanting to buy Greenland and how he was going to put tariffs on poor Denmark, right? And I'm thinking, well, actually, and also I think he said that he doesn't renounce using military force. And I'm thinking to myself, he doesn't need tariffs. He doesn't actually even need military force. All he has to say is, starting from tomorrow, if you don't sell me Greenland, actually, if you don't even give me Greenland, or even pay me to take Greenland, I'm simply going to say that Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Amazon can no longer do business in your country. Done. Game over. Finished. Right? You will have the deed of surrender signed before the end of the day. So the problem of sovereignty and building our own Euro stack is not a problem of tomorrow. It's a problem of today. Because Greenland is going to go in the next 6 months if we don't fix it. So maybe this is a depressing final thought, but I think it's very important to stress the urgency. And this is what, as someone working in business and trying to do this in Europe, we don't want subsidies, as Jonas says. We don't want tax breaks. Simply give us the demand and the opportunity to do it. And there are many entrepreneurs in Europe who have the ambition and the drive and the competence to do it. But we need the opportunity. So, yes.
Great message. And I want to really reinforce this because, we saw the competitiveness compass yesterday from the European Commission. There's a sentence that says, we may consider mandating the public administration to buy European. And say, well, what about the private, right? Why can we not tell European businesses, need cloud, buy 30% or whatever it is that you need to buy European? This is not a swear word in places like the US or Asia. Why is it that we are fairer than fair and we don't really, we do this self-harm? It is inconceivable to me. So I want to move on to Marian Gläser, who is a startup in a way, but more than that, Brighter AI. And I would like your perspective before we have the perspective of the funders. Please go ahead.
Sure. So first, very nice to be here. And as a founder, we actually, Andy and I, we share a similar story. Also basically driven the company by values, by European values. Started in 2017 with generative AI technology to solve GDPR. And so 7 years later, generative AI, solving GDPR, you would say we should either, or I should either be a millionaire or be bankrupt. It's neither nor, so something is odd here. Just to give a bit of a perspective of basically how we saw regulation, especially in our field, when the GDPR started, we also saw it as a huge potential to actually empower and enforce European technologies and a different kind of technologies. It went completely different. Industries, companies are either finding workarounds and not following data privacy, or they stop collecting data at all. And both is not good for business, of course. And then to give one a statement where regulation, really failed. In Germany, there's a regulatory body as of GDPR Article 43 to certify technologies. Until this day, there has not even been one certification in Germany that is GDPR compliant, not even one. They just have been accredited half a year ago. And if you look at Europe, 3 weeks ago, there was only Bulgaria and PwC which have been certified. And this is since 2018. There's no official certification as for Article 42 and certification body Article 43. And that's a problem. So why am I sitting here and not yet bankrupt? Because we build a very strong technology based on data privacy that we actually could export internationally. Because the GDPR, value-driven, and many other countries for example Japan, actually triggered other regulations. And we were there 3 years before, having a technology in place that we now export. So funny enough, today, Europe is not our biggest market, but it's Asia, it's, for example, Japan. And this is how we survived. And this is a panel question: can we build a digital sovereignty ecosystem? So our application is in place. So we have technologies, niche technologies, very relevant technologies that work, that are state-of-the-art, that are world-class in their field. So the applications are there. And I would like to, for the Eurostack, because I think it's a very relevant question how to get there, piggyback on something that also Jonas said about specifically infrastructure, or you said the roads as a fundament that we need to change. And my background is IT management and technical founder, so I look at it very, very practically. And when you basically have decision makers or technical changes, especially in chips or in infrastructure like cloud, the technical excellence that Jonas talked about is tremendous. GPUs from NVIDIA, AWS, Azure, this is great technology. It's beyond what any European company currently can offer, and the tool set behind it, like our test deployments, our training algorithms, everything is on the ecosystem of NVIDIA. And so the lock-in effect on that is tremendous. And I'm not sure, I'm not a policymaker, but I think that the Digital Markets Act, when looking at this kind of ecosystem, is probably not fully covering it. Second, the decision makers that actually need to make proposals to change infrastructure, the architects, the digital departments, they are in love with technology as well, and they want to set on things that actually work and that they used to. So there's also a cultural change. There's a mindset change that needs to happen as well in order to enforce this. And last but not least, there are many glue codes, like elements that you need to implement to use hyperscalers, AWS, Lambda functions, Azure. There's glue code in specific that locks in companies that the opportunity cost to switch to a different infrastructure are so big that it will take a long time for European companies to catch up to solve those three things. And it's not money, it's mindset, it's lock-in, and it's opportunity cost that we're facing. So I'm a founder, so I would like to end with a positive note, because I already said that I think that applications are there, and I think it starts at the application level, at the application layer. Follow the money. Like a digital society, the money goes into the effective applications, and companies that are successful in the end, they can afford to set out new risk in terms of switching the switching to other infrastructure if they can afford it. And it's so nice to be with Proton and Aleph Alpha and such around, because we are the application layers. But right now, we're trying to make a market that is heavily regulated, that is pressured. So being successful or empowered is enabling then to build new roads. So summing it up, I would say, as for our company history, regulation has to be done to empower. It should be done, but to empower, that should be the focus. Second, we have to be fast. As we're dealing with ourselves, the world is moving on, they're not waiting, and I would actually correct, I would not say we should start today. We already didn't start. We shouldn't press the snooze button again. I read this recently, but actually have already started, so get going. And as a founder, I would say we have the technology, we can, and as a European, I think we must.
Great, thank you, Marian. Very on message, very much. I mean, it is bewildering to me that as a reflection, as a collective of people working in the world of regulation and antitrust, we have been funneling our effort and our intellectual sort of attention incredibly into regulation taming big tech in the last 5 years. And at times I was posing the question, but that was not polite in civil society. What are we regulating for? Because I couldn't see that, frankly, putting some taming brakes on big tech was going to actually put points on European GDP by really enabling these kind of businesses to flourish. And as Jonas said, all the business people on this panel have made the point much better than I can, but the issue is value creation and then value capture. If you are just trying to restrain the big platforms, but at the same time there is no demand, there is no opportunity for growth, the scale of the market isn't there, what is the point? Who is going to invest money into something that goes nowhere? To paraphrase, in fact, to quote Mario Draghi, economies that are persistently underheated don't grow because the engine isn't turning. So the engine only turns if there is a little bit of growth. As a last but not least, I want to move to Ivan, who works, of course, for the Public Investment Bank in France, BI France. And what you're here to talk about really is the perspective of funders, people who are actually putting money into new businesses, scaling up, because the view in Europe is we just don't really have, and in part it's true, capital markets, VCs that are remotely comparable to what the US does, and so we are in a hopeless situation. The funds are not there, starters do not find the funds, they all have to emigrate to the US. What is your perspective?
Very good.
Keep talking.
Yes, very good question. Thank you, and humbled to be here. 3 little disclaimers. The first one, opinions are personal. Second disclaimer.
Everyone speaks for themselves here.
Thank you. Second disclaimer, I'm a huge fan of Europe, and you even learn things about your own culture. So an Irish friend told me about the bonjour effect. So apparently it's when a French guy goes to a meeting and is the nicest person at the beginning of the meeting, and then you do your presentation and he just asks the most horrible question after. So that's the bonjour effect. Because it's late, we'll do a small bonsoir effect just before the cocktail. And the third disclaimer is that I've been through the European washing machine. I've done some EIT project, FP7, very old stuff, H2020, all these horrible, please take my European money departments. And it was very, very frustrating, to be honest. The intentions were great, but it was so inefficient. And if you had the luck to work with thousands of entrepreneurs and funders and funding a company, is the hardest job in the world. That's for sure. And a funder, they have only one intention, is to build a great and useful product. And for this, they need great ideas, time, and money. For great ideas, we are super competitive because Europe has a special sensitivity to this. And we had the luck to work with Cristina and Paul on a fair data economy framework, and European vision is great about this. But for time and money, we are really bad. Because first, we waste funders' time, and that's a crime. We need to be efficient. You can't say to a funder, go to the EIT website. Like, this is not nice. You have to be efficient, you have to optimize his time, because that's the most precious thing he has. And then about money, of course, we don't have the same capital as US, but we can use smart money. It's like stock markets. People that owns 1% of some company, activists, they can change everything in the company. And majority shareholders, they do nothing. Same for capital in VC world. If you are smart, if you are efficient, funders will follow your decisions and will see you as a sparring partner. So this is why we really need to act on this. And for this, we need a toolbox. And at BPI France, we are working on this toolbox every day. It's like when we meet a funder, we're like, what can I do for you? Do you need grants? Do you need loans? Do you need equity investments? Do you need intros to VCs? And we can even intros them to US VCs, because maybe it's the best investors. And you also need to be transparent, not trying to oversell Europe. For some stuff, Europe is the greatest place to do innovation. And for some stuff, we are terrible. So we need first to be transparent with this. Because if you lie to the funder, and then 5 years after he discovers this, he will instantly go to US to build his next venture. So I think we need to optimize this toolbox. The good news is that everybody is kind of aligned on this. But for this, we might be more competitive and more aggressive, as you say. To give you a very concrete example, Michel Vasco is one of the top engineers in reinforcement learning in the world. To work on Llama 3, Mark Zuckerberg directly called him, say, I want you to work on this. You have these resources, and I want you to tackle this technical challenge. I'm sorry, but Emmanuel Macron didn't do this. Ursula von der Leyen didn't do this. And they should have this strategy. Direct calls from kind of higher political forces to say, we want you, and we have the occasion to give you a great project. That makes a difference, because the competition for such profiles is so high that we need to go further than just say, I can get you a meeting at the DG Connect or DG Grow. No disrespect, I know they're doing a great job. I'm working for an administration too. But when I want to be efficient, and I said to Michel, okay, you will meet my CEO first, because then he can maybe talk to Macron, and then things can happen. And the good news is that we have an AI summit the 11th in 2 weeks, so if it clicks well, we can be efficient. So you have to take shortcuts, because we don't have any more time. The cloud revolution is kind of past. The LLM one is on a dangerous slope. So we need to act now. And if you have to take shortcuts and people are not happy that you sent an email to the CEO, you have to do so. We don't have this luxury. Thanks a million again, and let's get some drinks.
Thank you so much. And, you know, it reminds me of that famous sentence, what are the 8 scariest words in the English language? I can get you a meeting with DG Connect. Or DG Grow. Yay! I feel so excited. So, I think that we are indeed on time. I wonder if perhaps, Robin, you as the sort of the initial speaker want to just say a couple of words that can wrap this up, and then we will see Lina Cannon. No one is supposed to leave the room. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I think one thing that I felt was striking on this panel is actually the level of alignment between speakers. It wasn't much of a debate. And, you know, again, we've heard it repeated time and again. We don't need, you know, subsidies. We don't need this to be made easy. You know, business is hard. It's always going to be hard. But we just need to stop being prevented from doing things. And what's preventing us is not necessarily regulation or state intervention. What's preventing us is the sovereignty that the tech platforms have over our lives, over our societies, over what we can do. And that sovereignty is what we need to reclaim.
Thank you. And join me in thanking the whole panel. Thank you thank you, Jonas, for a very great discussion. So I think we are on time where you can leave, because I'll do the interview with Lina and I can release all of you. And where is my fellow partner?